first of all, there's a visceral reaction to what we just watched, or what should I say, what we just endured. Olin, I'll start with you. What did you think watching this? How did it happen, and where do they go from here?
Watching it as a former Bear, as a former player, it's not often when you do the radio show you feel like you don't want to come on and talk about the Chicago Bears, right? You feel it's not often that you're embarrassed to be associated with the organization that just put on that show they put on there at Soldier Field against what we called a lot of times in the pregame show the worst football team in the NFL. Right, to come out there and put that kind of performance on the field, on film. We talked about you'd be worried about them after you watch them against the Arizona Cardinal game. Can we all stop now? Can we all stop saying that it's not a problem when you question your coach after a Hail Mary? Can we all stop saying it's not a problem when you come out and say the offensive coordinator doesn't come up with the first 15? Can we all stop saying that it's not a problem when the wide receiver questions the coach's calls? There is a way that football works. You're either coaching it or you're allowing it. And right now in the Chicago Bears building, you are allowing this kind of performance on a football field, and it all starts with the people at the top. But we've been saying that, Pat, for too long at Hallis Hall.
Yeah, and I hate to toot my own horn, but I did. I picked the Pats, right? I just had a bad feeling this morning.
I think I got a text or a tweet that said, call him soothsayer, Mannelly, after the game.
But what I'm saying there, everything Olin just summed up there is kind of what I felt this morning. I was worried about this team and what they were going to be today and what was going to show up. And what showed up was what I thought was going to happen. They can't deal with all this adversity. They have too many damn meetings. They talk too much. They're not taking care of business. Obviously, they have some injuries. You can't use those injuries as an excuse against this Patriots team.
You can't, because they are who they are. The Patriots came in the worst team in the league. They left with a victory. So what does that make the Bears? You also have 4 backups on the offensive line besides Coleman Shelton, who is not exactly a guy that you consider a bona fide starter. He was brought here as a backup. The Bears give up 9 sacks. They now have gone 24 straight possessions without an offensive touchdown. Think about that. The last time they scored an offensive touchdown was against the Washington Commanders. DeAndre Swift, I think, with a 56-yard run. They're allergic to the end zone. And I think when you look at what do they do now, everybody wants results. I don't think the Bears historically have ever fired a head coach in season. But, Olin, when you talk about change, it's not just a visceral reaction. It's not an overreaction. This is the NFL. You lose 3 games in a row, that qualifies as a crisis. What do you think the Bears will do in response to that?
It's not players going to be meeting anymore, right? It's presidents and owners and general managers. And when you saw today, their offensive line too, riddled by injuries, right? They have had more combinations than anybody else in the NFL playing offensive line. So this team, you shouldn't have went out there at home and looked like this versus this team. And to Pat's point, you were worried about them the way they constantly kept talking about the problems in their building. That's why we were saying earlier, it's all right to be quiet sometimes. It's all right to just go back to work. It's even today when you're watching, it's like, why does Caleb keep changing the play at the line of scrimmage? Just run the play that's called. Let's get up there, let's run the play that's called, and then all of a sudden we see, I don't know how many times we talked about the offensive line plan for a young quarterback. We've talked about that. What if you get injuries? Now it overwhelms them all of a sudden because, Pat, they do have a bunch of injuries on their offensive line. And now you got 9 sacks, and some of them were the quarterback holding the ball, but very few. And it just doesn't look like they have a plan. It doesn't look like they have a direction. And if you are in that at Hallis Hall right now today, after that loss, I don't know what you do. I really don't know what you do. I don't know how you get better. I guess you say get healthier, move on from coaches, move on from OCs, move on from head coaches. Then you just said, okay, all the people in charge have made all the wrong decisions for like 15 years now, right? How many times can you fire the same positions and keep pointing the fingers at the same guys? It'll be very interesting, David, what they do when they look at this result that they got today.
I think something has to change offensively. You have to do something. Listen to these numbers. Okay, the Commanders a couple weeks ago, they only had 15 points. They were 2 of 12 on 3rd down. Against the Cardinals, they had 9 points. They were 3 of 14 on 3rd down. Today, they had 3 points. They were 1 of 13 on 3rd down. Those are historically bad numbers in an era now where it's set up for offenses, right? You're supposed to score points, and they only have 27 points in 3 games. Something has to change. You cannot keep running that offense, those play calls out there for those guys out there.
And
you
this
just
is
can't
against the easy part of
100%.
the schedule. Now you get into the teeth where you have the Packers and the way they get takeaways with, one of the biggest ball hawks in the league. And you have the Vikings with Brian Flores. Good luck with that. Then you have, on Thanksgiving Day, Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. Thanks for nothing, because that is not a good matchup. You get into the schedule, into the division, and you are now you squandered the opportunity to build up some capital, to build up some momentum. You now have a team that not only it sounds absurd to talk about a playoff contender, a division contender, taking the North. Goodness sakes, what year? Not this year, not next year. This looks much more serious and severe. You have a defense that has probably suffered. They have some injuries, but you have an offense that can't do anything because they can't protect the quarterback and they can't establish the run.
They can't, even when T.J. Edwards gets a free takeaway from Drake May. We still can't put the ball in the end zone, and actually we take a sack and take ourselves out of field goal range. The offense is completely broken, and we talked about in the pregame show what Pete Carroll said about Shane Waldron last year in mid-November. We talked about that. He talked about how they had to use the unique talents they had on the Seahawks offense at wide receiver. Does that sound familiar to you, right? So now I think about it, I go back and say, okay, well, who's in charge of Halas Hall? Well, it's Ryan Post. Why did they say they fired Luke Getsy, who just got fired again? Because he didn't change his game plans. He couldn't adjust, right? That's the same thing Pete Carroll said about Shane Waldron last year in Seattle. So all I'm saying is the people doing the hiring, they have to answer for this. Would be Coach Eberflus's third offensive coordinator.
I don't think he's going to be given a chance to hire a third offensive coordinator.
I mean, if they change that position
right
now.
If they did right now, if they do that right now, it would be to somebody who's on the staff. Thomas Brown.
I think you have
Chris Morgan.
Just what we've seen the last 3 weeks, it's just inexcusable. And we talk about going into the season, what was Caleb Williams going to look like? What was his progress going to look like? And it looked pretty good for 3 weeks. There was a point we were thinking they were going to be 7-2 going into this game next week. Now they're sitting at 4-5, and this offense is broken, and Caleb looks bad. Caleb is playing poorly.
You are wearing the same kind of sweatshirt that the Bears coaching staff was wearing on the sidelines. And Olin complimented the Bears coaches for their apparel today. Could you sneak in one of those meetings and maybe share with them some of your thoughts?
If we were closer, I would like to try to.
and to Mannelly's point, right, against the Jaguars, they look really good. Right, against the Commanders, in the fourth quarter, they take the lead late, and then that Hail Mary, and then there's just a meltdown after that because all of a sudden, everyone comes out and questions the coaching staff. Right, it seemed like the players were running the building, right, which is fine to get input from everybody, but it just seemed like everybody was talking too much about it.
But when that happens, though, how real is it if the players who were voicing their opinions lose confidence in the coaching staff? Today, that was what we saw.
Well, that's what we saw in Arizona.
Yep.
And that's why I was worried, right, because I didn't see that when I watched the Commanders game. But when I watched the Arizona film, and Pat, like we like to talk about a lot of times, people lie to you. The film doesn't, right? So I didn't. After what happened in Washington, you're pissed about the Hail Mary. But when I turned the film on, I thought, okay, man, like this is not too bad. But the noise worried you. The noise around the team, everybody talking so much, worried you. And then the Cardinals film, we talked about in the pregame, how much you were worried. You actually thought, man, if they do that again, they could lose this game because they got blown out in Arizona. And we're seeing their first in the second quarter, and we looked at each other and said, they could get blown out today.
Yep.
Which they did. They did just by watching that game. You thought, okay, they may not score again. And if the Patriots put 2 more scores up, this is another blowout. You just lost to what a lot of people said is the worst team in the NFL at home by a pretty darn good margin. And that is Billings is out, Montez is hurt, your 2 tackles are out, but the Patriots would argue half of their team is out also.
Yeah, they're missing a bunch of starters. And the thing I want to go back and watch now when we get the tape is the body language. You talk about are the guys quitting on the team, and you say the tape doesn't lie. You can talk about how their play and then also their body language after play. Are they getting up? Are they hustling? What are they looking like on the sideline? I'm not sure what I saw today, but I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think you
saw when they came out after halftime, DJ Moore caught a pass that was obviously drawn up in the locker room. We need to get him the ball. This is what you run. This is what you do. He unleashed some frustration that you felt like had been building up for how many weeks or how many series because they have now gone 24 without scoring a touchdown. And I wonder if that's the kind of thing you're talking about. This has got to be a frustrated team. And now that they lost their 3rd in a row, I don't know how that's going to manifest itself publicly and openly.
Yeah, but that's what we're talking about in the pregame, that when someone like DJ Moore has a problem, when someone like DJ Moore is sounding the alarm, You may not like his message, but he's saying to you there's a problem. There's a problem here, and we don't like the direction this is going. Now, I don't like taking it to the media, but I don't really know what's going on in that building. And it looks like there's not a lot good going on in that building. There's not a lot of good players don't believe anymore in what the coaches are preaching. And Pat, we've all been a part of teams like that. It's hard to get it back. There was a couple times today I found interesting when guys were running off the sideline. There wasn't a lot of handshaking.
Yep, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, there wasn't a lot of energy on the sideline. Like after kickoffs, everybody was just walking to the sideline. Right? It just looks to me like this team right now, they're not all in to playing this game. And you hate to say that about an NFL football team, but when you watch that game they just played, when you watch the game they played last week, ever since that Hail Mary, it has not been good.
Yeah, the other things you need to watch too is a guy running over their teammate to help him up off the ground. You know, that's kind of when you don't see guys doing that like they normally do when you're winning and things are going well. That's when you can tell a team has quit. They're just kind of quit on their teammate. They're just really worried about themselves. They're not worried about the big picture and everything else. That's a telling factor, and that's something to watch when you watch games.
I think it's
from
really
now on out with the Bears.
Hard to know what to think about Caleb Williams because it's easy to look at the numbers, and we'll talk about those in a moment. But when you have the lack of protection that he has on a consistent basis, you worry about bad habits, you worry about a lot of different things. 9 sacks today, his numbers, they stunk. 16 of 30, 120 yards, wasn't threatening anybody down the field. And you look at where we were coming into the season. There was a lot of hope invested in Caleb Williams. Maybe it was hype more than hope. But whatever the case, you thought that they had receivers. Remember the argument, does the best trio in the NFL, work in Chicago? Well, you look at the money invested. Keenan Allen's making $23 million. DJ Moore has a $110 million contract. Rome Odunze had a $13 million signing bonus. Those guys are not threatening anybody down the field. And then, oh, by the way, Cole Kmet, the $50 million tight end, he finally got targeted today. I thought the place was going to erupt here with enthusiasm because they finally found him. So where are we with Caleb Williams in terms of responsibility and expectations?
We want to be clear on what we saw today, because when we went to this game, he wasn't going against Patrick Mahomes. Caleb wasn't, right? He wasn't going against a veteran quarterback. He wasn't going against Jared Goff. He wasn't going against the Detroit Lions, right? We thought that he was going against another rookie quarterback with a struggling offensive line, right? So it was a pretty even matchup. And then we thought that their biggest advantage was the coaching staff. We thought our Chicago Bears coaching staff versus the Patriots coaching staff was an advantage. Well, the Patriots proved us wrong all day long. All day long. So if you're not worried about where Caleb is after the game you just watched against the competition he just played against, right? This wasn't a good football team by any means, right? This wasn't a ferocious pass rush. They almost matched their pass rush sack total today. They almost matched it in one day. That's what you're worried about when you come away from this game. Why did we get out coached so bad? And why did their rookie quarterback, with just as bad as an offensive line, with just as questionable as a play caller, look better than our rookie quarterback
against a better defense?
On the road.
Yeah, against a better defense, right. I'm getting really worried about Caleb now. Is it that he's regressing him personally, or is it the coaching staff, the injuries in front of him? Is he nervous with the O-line in front of him? What is it? And it just does not look good. He was inaccurate.
That's a slippery slope, though, because you wonder if it's all related. If his performance has affected the confidence.
We are all on a slippery slope right now after watching that game.
Yes, we are on a slippery slope. But I just wonder, what direction do they go? What can they do to try to help him improve and maybe regain some of that confidence? Because you'd want victories. I don't know if they're going to come. You want success in touchdowns. They haven't scored 1 in 2 games. You'd have a lot of things that you want and need that I don't know how you produce, especially if you don't make any changes with your coaching staff, with your play calling, and with your approach.
Okay, I'll say one. It's easy. Protect better, which is probably not going to happen because they have injuries, right? And then you just named all those receivers. And then Moose Johnson mentioned it. They're not getting open. There's a lot of times they are not open. When they're in man-to-man or whatever, they're just not open. You pay them that much money, they should win those matchups. And they're not doing that. And that to me is part of the problem. It's everybody included. And how much is this hurting Caleb? Because it looked darn good for those 3 games in the middle of the season.
It really
I was excited, but now it's all regret. We're going down that slippery slope. And it doesn't look good. And is that causing him to be inaccurate? Is that causing his feet and his timing and all that stuff to just get out of whack?
312-644-6767. We know you have opinions. We know you have reactions. We kind of think we know what you're going to be asking for. It's going to be a familiar refrain, but let us know. We are here for you. We're going to be here for a couple hours after this loss, 19-3, Bears lose to the Patriots at home at Soldier Field. The boos were loud, and I understand that, and they came early, and they were heard often. I don't know if I can blame anybody for any reaction or any overreaction to what they saw today. When you look at the last couple of years, does this loss feel – unfortunately, we have many to compare to. Does this loss feel like rock bottom?
It feels pretty close to it for where this team was thought to be headed, right? And we thought we were turning the corner with a franchise that hasn't won a playoff game again since me and Pat were on the field, which is now a very, very long time
We're old
ago.
now.
Remember, though, going into this game, what the biggest problem of what you watched today was the Bears' run defense is a question for them. But don't worry about it. It's only against good run teams, right? The Bears' pass blocking is a question for them. But don't worry about it. These guys can't rush the passer, right? Remember, that's what we said going into this game. So how bad are the Chicago Bears as we sit here now? Because those are the questions we asked, and every answer we got was, yeah, but they're the worst team in the league.
Right.
But when you lose Billings, it's that big of a loss, right? When you lose a Darnell Wright, when you lose Braxton Jones, and you don't put assets into your offensive line, and you keep drafting cornerbacks, and you draft another wide receiver instead of an offensive lineman, and you draft Velus Jones instead of an offensive lineman in the third round, and you don't pick up offensive linemen, you don't sign off veteran offensive linemen. When you sign offensive linemen, they get hurt. You have a problem. And that particular problem sits at the general manager's doorstep.
No doubt about it.
And Olin, when you put the Patriots on to watch the games, I went back 3 or 4 games to watch. I'm like, they're terrible. We can't be this bad. We can't. But then I said the outside noise and all that stuff just felt like it was snowballing a little bit. And it did, and now we are that bad. You lost to arguably the worst team in the NFL.
Remember what your score was, 19-16. You had the Bears losing by 3.
I know.
They lost 19-3.
You gave them too much credit.
I know.
Yeah.
And that offense with all that talent.
Yep.
Are the Bears, the biggest debate after this game is, are the Bears
They won the takeaway battle.
a bad
Again,
team?
that's 2 games in a row.
Yeah.
Are the Bears a bad team that lost to the worst team in the NFL, or the worst team in the NFL that lost to a bad team? That's where
That's
you
the
are with
question
this
now.
team. At this
We're going to find out how bad they lose these next 3 weeks.
Not because after the 3 games we watched, right? The 2 games that got blown out by Arizona's not a great team. The Patriots are a bad team. They lost to the Hail Mary in Washington. The question is their roster as talented as we think it is? Is their coaching staff? Keep saying Coach Eberflus is elite. Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Maybe not, right?
Not after today.
You're allowed, after what you just watched, you're allowed to question everything. Right? They told us.
I do.
Don't worry about us talking. Don't worry about us talking. We can talk. It's the way players are nowadays. Oh, it's time to shut up.
It is.
It's time to shut up.
And when we talk about
Maybe
the level
DJ
of
Moore's
conversation,
not calling you tomorrow morning.
Oh, I don't. He'll be there 7:59. He'll be on the phone.
No, the way he caught that ball and fought.
He's a consummate pro.
That's right.
He'll face the music if he doesn't.
Maybe
be very
they should start
disappointed.
listening to him. Maybe we should all start listening to what he says.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe he's trying to tell us something.
Yep.
The next level of conversation, the next I think intense scrutiny will come for Ryan Poles. I do think that's the way it works. You guys know it. You've been around long enough. You look at the players, if they fall short, yes, it's easy to criticize. You look at the coaching and the play calling, that's a tradition in Chicago unlike any other. Pretty soon, though, when you're this bad at this stage and you weren't expected to be, you start to look at how the roster was put together, prioritizing things like, or not prioritizing the offensive line. Olin, you've been on it from the very beginning. I know you guys are consistent with this, but it's going to get louder and it's going to be a lot more people agreeing.
And Poles praised the depth on this offensive line at the beginning of the year. We're
Yeah,
not talking about the overall talent. He said this is the best depth we've ever had. Well, now it's being challenged and it's terrible. It's not very good. So that's another knock on him.
But both sides, right? Both sides of the ball on their lines are challenged right now. Right? They lost some guys, and when you talk about their depth, you talk about developing young players. What young players have they had a chance to draft and develop on their offensive line? They really haven't. They've moved on. They've moved on to veteran free agents, right? They've signed guys and brought them in. They lost Billings. You drafted Pickens early. You got to get him back healthy and get him back going, but not a good game today.
Nope. Right?
Not a good game. The last couple games, teams are running the ball right at this defense where you have high draft picks, where you have guys you've given a lot of money to, and 2 linebackers a lot of money also. It's just very frustrating to watch this team. We got to keep saying this. After that Hail Mary, to collapse like this, the way they've collapsed, the way their film has changed after the Hail Mary. I'm just talking about the film. I'm not talking about what they talk about. I'm not talking about anything else. I'm talking about the players' performance, what they've looked like since that Hail Mary, since they question each other, since they went after people, what does it look like? I don't think the leadership has failed at the top. I don't think the coaching leadership has failed. I think the leadership has failed them across the board on the team. I think the 8 captains failed them. I think the coaching staff failed them. I think the general manager failed them in these last 3 weeks. Now, can those leaders pick them back up?
And if one play derailed your entire season, how tight is that structure? How fragile are you if you are letting one play, as catastrophic as it was? And look, the ball's in the Hall of Fame for a reason. That was a play that you don't see every day or every season. So as the Commanders lose the game or get jumped off and get about to lose 28-27 to the Steelers on the same field where the Bears lost, I do wonder, all of this culture that they embrace and we talk about, how good was it if they're letting one play ruin everything else?
That's a knock on Eberflus. To me, that's a knock on Eberflus. Again, the Fire Eberflus book, that's another page in there. If you're going to fall apart from one play like that and allow everybody to start talking and pointing fingers, your culture's not that good. And they've been praising this culture thing, but that's your culture's not that good if you let one play like that lead to these next losses like the way they've lost.